welcome to the channel. In today's video we're going to go through on my 1.5 year review of the Kobalt 10-inch carbide tipped table saw. It has the ability to be folded and condensed down into a smaller item, and as I stick it beneath my workbench. This is one of the best models I've found so far for the money. I have to say this is not only on the budget side, but I actually feel it is involved or has quite a few extra little accoutrements that other models kind of lacked on. I was in the market for a table saw and I've been searching for one forever. I had gotten cheap yard sale finds that didn't have a fence, or they had a fence and everything was good, but the motor like wobbled and all sorts of horrible things that I used in the past for different projects that I absolutely needed a table saw for. And I didn't have the space for a radial arm saw or just any kind of overhead saw arm, anything. And this was the one product that was on my absolute wish list. I've been searching everywhere high and low for a worthwhile deal. I'd used them numerous times. Any brands such as Ryobi's original version, the green tools, as some of you may remember them as, or that weird type of blue, depending on what region you were part of. I believe we had blue here, and then green was the cross seas edition and whatnot, you could say, or international version. But I used those a whole bunch. I used Deltas. I used a smattering of things. I even used the DeWalt's for quite a while, depending on what construction company I was working for at the time. Glazing being the main profession in that matter. But we used table saws nonetheless for all sorts of different things, ripping out material for shipping and transportation. We used it to fill in holes until we were able to pass our inspections and whatnot. And then we would go in with our laminated glass or any type of material that technically needed to go in there. But in order to pass code, sometimes we'd have to rip down material to fill it in there, or sometimes for doing walls and whatnot, for returning to our window frames. There's all sorts of different types of things that we had to use a table saw for. And we'd even swap them out for Diablo blades so that we could cut all of our aluminum on them for cutting miters and stuff. That's where it got a little scary. Of course, any table saw not properly used, not properly maintained, is a death trap. And there are some features in here that I was actually heavily wanting, but I never had the ability to purchase a model in my budget to be able to facilitate having them. There's quite a few extra little fun goodies in this particular model, as well as some information I found out about good old Kobalt. So Kobalt is considered more along a Lowe's home brand, or the house brand as most people refer to items as such, kind of like a Kroger product or anything else, depending on what you're talking about. This one in particular, for this model, let me pull up the actual proper specs on before I go too far into it here. So this is the Kobalt 15 amp 10-inch table saw. It comes with a quick folding rolling stand. It is a 5,000 RPM motor. It is job site ready, as they say. It is job site ready, and it is also residential ready, just out of the box. There was a little bit of putting together, but if you're keen enough to be able to use a table saw, you're more than capable to put this together. It was very minimal construction, and just a basic Phillips screwdriver pretty much did the entire job for it. There was a few things on the model that I got that I had to go back and get swapped out. They were minimal, but like the little piece of plastic right here that they use that has a line drawn on it to show you your mark has an adjustment capability in it, so that way you can get it properly tuned to show exactly where on this nice little tape measure they got built into it here, where your cut's at. And mine came cracked. So there was a simple little fix there on the bottom of the arms. Kind of can't quite see them in frame there. There's little plastic caps that go into the tube, or tube steel that they used for the framework for the folding stand, and they were missing. So it was very simple, technically surface level, but I had purchased the product brand new, so I had to go through. But because it is a Lowe's house brand product, it was no questions asked. I came in, had the little broken pieces and missing components, talked to them about it. I didn't have to do anything past that. They were right there, took care of me. Great customer service. I really love Lowe's. They're kind of beating out some of their competition quite a bit for me lately, and they're getting a bit more of my money for that reason. I would choose a company that's willing to take care of the customer over a company that has the product readily available any day of the week. I'm willing to change up, do a different brand, anything in that facet if it means that I'm more taken care of and I have a better chance of being a return customer and getting taken care of time after time. I'm more willing to throw my money at that any day of the week than I am to go for the cheaper deal. That being said, back to the subject at hand. I got this, like I said, about a year and a half ago, and I got it on a Black Friday sale. It is phenomenal for what they charge for it. So to give you an idea on this one, as a quick rundown, the competition I was looking at was the DeWalt, and it is a other smaller version. It was their job site without the folding stand and some of the extra bits. 10-inch model. I am definitely a 10-inch fan, tried and true. If the blade had to be 12 inches for a table saw, I feel that you should probably use a different tool than a table saw personally, just because there's that much more surface area to grab and throw the product of material that you're using right back at you, which is a lot of different issues that table saws in general have. This one has a safety feature in it. It's a little cutback blade on the back here that's just a little guide, so that way your material, let me show you here real quick. Don't know if you can quite see it here, but there's this little hook-in piece that goes around the blade just on the back side of it to keep your material from actually going into and causing a throwback or a knockback. There's a couple different terms for it. Basically, as material is going through the table saw, your blade is in a constant revolution towards you. And as you're pushing against this force as it's cutting, you're fine. The problem happens when you're on the end of your cut and you're not thinking and you get a little too close to the fence, trying to stay away from the blade, and you start pushing on the outside, your material pushes sideways and goes into the blade. Well, if the blade's consistently going at 5,000 revolutions per minute, it's going to grab that piece of wood and it's just going to go in the path of least resistance and cause some serious damage. Multiple people have, if you look it up, you just look up table saw wound or table saw emergency room. Any of those, if you want to see those, you can see just the effect that that little piece of wood, even something that's tiny, flying at 5,000 revolutions per minute, even for a split second, can really do some damage, especially if you're using something that you just rip down that's a lot more javelin-like. So always with everything, be careful, read the instructions, be safe, but table saws in general can be very unsafe just off of that alone. So besides going with a saw stop or anything that has any kind of electrical sensing capability to know if the finger is near the blade or anything like that, just on a basic table saw, they installed a few different little extras, just like this little blade here. I'll actually look that up here real quick. So the item came with a blade guard. It also came with two, on the side here, I'll pull them out. Well, to give you kind of a premise of an idea here is that your teeth on it, if the blade is consistently pushing this way and you're pushing your material forward, this little guy sits in there, and as you push your material, it lifts these little arms up. Now, as it's latched here and your material is getting on the tail end of it, it actually keeps it so if this was to grab, this would grab too and keep it from kicking back at you if it's in far enough. So we'll use a scrap here to give you an idea. So if you're pushing through with it, it locks it in and kind of just keeps it from flying back towards you. So it helps to keep the material as you were to push, bring your hands back away from the blade, keep pushing it forward. This actually keeps it from flying back at you. And it's attachable and detachable. It has a nice little spring in there, and you just latch it in. It's pretty straightforward. So that's one of the nice extra features they give. All of this also stores on the side of the tool. I haven't really used or removed this as much as I should. Depending on what I'm working on, this is definitely all features and benefits that I would very much like to keep installed more often, but for storing this and fitting underneath and being compact, it's a little large to fit on the underneath. So this is your actual blade guard, and it is a very nice hookup that works very straightforward. So it sits in place over top of your blade, so as the blade is spinning, you have less capability to touch it. If you were to have anything hit, it'd be these plastic guards. So if you bump it, you might hear that grab for a second. It's not going to destroy it. It'll just take a little bite out of it. But it will be rather better for this to get a bite out of it versus your finger, or the loss of a finger, hand, or anything. Or the worst thing is if you had long sleeves or gloves on, it would pull that into it. So this gives you a little bit of a safeguard past that. So there is a guard that is also given to you, which is awesome. So your material just goes underneath, and these just drop down as soon as the blade is done cutting. So as the material runs through, these raise up and then drop back down on both sides, which is nice for your cutoff piece as well as your actual material that you're trying to get to a more precise cut. So that's one of the nice items that comes with the kit. Pretty straightforward to put on, take off. And you don't have to uninstall this, but you can if you needed to. The cover, if you needed to change out the blade or adjust / take off or put on this little attachment guide or blade secure, better term for it, I'll find that here in a second. You can actually take out your guard without any kind of screws or anything, which is one of the things I was looking for when I was looking at a table saw. So this blade insert is actually licensed through Kobalt, but what Kobalt as a company does, from what I've been able to find so far, is they lease the rights to be able to utilize certain components and proprietary items that they kind of outfit their tools with. Some of the stuff that I was looking for, such as the fence, for instance, is not a handle, and it is not all on one side for latching that only hooks onto here and then allows this to be loose. It actually has front and back clamps, and this is almost identical to DeWalt, which is something I liked about it. There was a few discrepancies with the DeWalt model, not only in price. I was actually willing to spend, I believe it was around $300 for that model at the time. I had the ability and finances, and I was very much on the fence about it. No pun intended. But it didn't jive with me. One of the main things was the insert. Even though there is adjustments, I actually adjusted the floor model at Lowe's for the DeWalt, and utilizing the same little guard here, I couldn't get it to lay flush. And even when I did finally get it to lay flush, everything felt smooth all the way around the corners. I could hit one corner or the other and the whole thing wobbled. And it just was very loose. And feeling a lot of just the general quality of it, I'm not really sure exactly. A lot of the DeWalt table saws and everything that I had used up to that point, a year and a half ago, were the 5-year-old model or the 2-year-old model. And it seemed like that year in particular, about a year and a half ago, when I was absolutely super looking close at them, it just seemed cheap. It seemed flimsy. The fence itself, even though it latched on both sides, I could put my finger and kind of push a little bit, and the whole fence would flex. This one, I can't get it to flex if I wanted to. It's nice, good, solid sheets of aluminum, and it's all curled on the edges, so there's like no real flex to it. It's very minimal. And it sits in nice and sturdy. The DeWalt had the same kind of little push stick hook in up on the top, but the push stick, not that it's a huge thing, just kept falling out. And when I put it in there, it rattled. Like, it seriously rattled. Just barely touching or kind of tapping it, you could hear it just rattle in there. And I imagine with the table saw running, even though it would just be for a second until you removed your little push stick, it would just sit there rattling, which would just annoy me to death. Every time I turn it on, I'd have to have this somewhere else, and then who knows, I'd probably forget this somewhere on the job site, anywhere along the way. So that's a few little complaints of the other model versus this one. So to continue on here a little bit, I ended up choosing this model with all sorts of different extra features. It has a little miter, little nice solid miter gauge, so you can set up your miters very nicely. It actually has a bearing with a spring behind it, so you can, I don't know if you can hear that, but it locks in each of your main degrees very well, and on the in-betweens it still is nice and tight because of that. It's all aluminum, including this part right here, which was plastic on a variety of models, including the DeWalt I was looking at. The only thing that's plastic on here is the actual turn knob, but everything else is solid. And one of the other things I really enjoy about this miter is that you don't have track all the way along this. So if I wanted to, I can hook this in and still have some play. So if this gets full of sawdust, I don't have to clean it out. That's one of the things I didn't like about the Ryobi, and I really didn't like about the DeWalt when I was using it, was that it had the full track all along it. So if this track had any little dirt, any little bit of debris, chunks of aluminum is what we would have all sorts of issues in there with. You pretty much just had a punch or chisel next to the table saw that if you were using these, you just real quick run through and like knock that all out. But if you didn't have that tool available to you, right there and then you'd have to go find it to clean it out so that you could actually run through your miter nice and smooth. It was annoying, really bothersome, and I hated that. This, you can kind of wiggle and move, and it gives you a little bit of slack to actually get out all that garbage that gets bound up in there. And it gives you the ability to allow this to kind of push some of that out, versus if you have 100% of the surface area with just a little bit of a 16th or like less than a 16th of gap between the track and the actual little implement going into it, it just wouldn't clear right. So this was one of the things that really also sold me on just some of the features of this and the build quality. So being as this is all aluminum, so I could definitely feel like I could drop this, I could knock this, and within reason. I mean, I'm not going to drive over it with my truck, but I feel like it would take a lot to bend and damage this, within reason, of course. And it has a nice little guide-in spot. This is plastic, this side is, but it's thick plastic, and it has multiple angles so it keeps structure. The Hitachi model and the Porter cable model had just flat sheets of plastic on it, and I hated that because first and foremost it rattled like crazy and it was flimsy. There was no structure to it. This actually has the same poles as the DeWalt has for structure as a skeleton, and then this as a skinning works phenomenally. And just a lot of the thought that went into additional pieces that can clamp into here for the fence. The fence can actually come off and detach, and it will latch into this. There you go. So your fence can actually latch into here and then pops right out. It gets pushed in a little bit further, but you get the idea. So there's all sorts of things that I really enjoy about this model, and I'm definitely very, very happy with. Go down that spec sheet again here real quick, just so you have an idea. So 15 amp, 10-inch table saw, has the quick folding rolling stand, comes with a 10-inch carbide blade, which I have yet to change. This thing has been through the gauntlet in the past few months, especially with all the content I've been cranking out, that I've been using this a lot more. And a few times I've actually had brad nails and nails still in the boards that I've worked through, and the blade powered right through it. No issues or complaints. It's not a Diablo blade, but for a carbide tipped blade, this actually does do a lot better than the Makita that I'd used in the job site with the Makita blade that supposedly was carbide tips. And we ended up shearing it on the first little tiny pin nail that we hit on a few different things. You could actually hear it hit, and then the blade just cut like garbage after that. It was just bad. This one I still have yet to change, and it still makes very nice cuts. This has a nice capability that I didn't see in a lot of table saws, which really drew me to this model, is that you can actually pop this little lever right here, and the whole table on this side and these two tracks will extend to make a 30-inch cut. That just blew my mind in a lot of ways, because the Ryobi I was looking at for the same price point, I got this on Black Friday's deal for $179.99. If you can get that, get it. That is the best deal you will ever find for all of what you get with this table saw. And it's an actual nice aluminum, pretty solid top. And it extends out, has an aluminum fence with very minimal plastic components, but it's thick plastic when it is there, so it's not some cheap flimsy garbage that you're going to fear is going to get damaged and broken. You have the same standard extending table for your cutoff, pretty basic, but it is interchangeable. If you do end up damaging, snapping, or breaking this, you can buy that component. Not from Lowe's. You're going to have to either go through Kobalt or Amazon or eBay, but they are available and they're pretty relatively cheap. So different items like that, if you were to throw this in the back of a truck, run it to a job site, and you had a table or another like chop saw or something hit this table saw and just dent this all up, or if you were on a job site and some material, either sheets of plywood, fell over and hit that, and it was enough weight and force that it did damage to it, you could buy an additional component without having to buy the whole table saw over again. Now, I have a rigid, I think this is a 6 horsepower shop vac, and it has, let's see here, it has in it a little over 2 inch, but I think they still classify it as a 2 inch. So it has a 2 inch opening on there, and it just slides right into the dust collector setup. Now with this model in particular, and Ryobi and a couple other brands use this as well, if you loosen this lever here, the whole thing actuates, but all your dust collection actuates with the blade. There's a couple Craftsman and the other Ryobi model that don't have that. They just have a whole open chamber on the bottom, and then you have to purchase, or in some kits they do have it, just a tube essentially in the middle that is a large funnel that just clicks into the bottom of your table saw, and then your dust collection hooks into the dead center. I feel with the shoot and tube capability that moves with it, you have a lot better wind tunnel effect. You're not going to be trying to pull all the surface area to put it in the center, which inevitably is going to have a lot of sawdust and garbage on the sides for all the little cut-off chunks that fall between the blade and just end up down in and around there. This is actually going to collect and pull a lot more material based on that design. I very much do enjoy as well on this table saw that everything is all right here. A couple of the other models, quite a few different ones, the Unisaws, and even I think SawStop has it on a couple of models too, where you have a secondary knob and then your primary knob, where your primary knob lifts up and down your actual blade, but then the secondary knob creates your miters and your angles and whatnot for the blade. This is all inclusive, so if I did want to really kick this up, pop that out, I literally just push it. Indicator is pretty accurate. Otherwise, I do use a what is it? A little angle finder, a little digital readout angle finder for my blades and my miters to be a little bit more precise. This guy just hooks on there just fine, and I usually run it off of that. But measuring between this, when this is level and I set absolute 0 off the top of my table and then hook it on the blade, I have found that off of this indicator, which is a really nice one and works perfectly, this is almost dead on accurate, and I have never adjusted it. That's just how the unit came. So I've listed off a variety of things I really enjoy, features and whatnot of this item. So to be a little bit more concise and kind of get down to brass tacks here with this table saw, different things that I would find, just kind of going down the list real quick. So the unit is a 15 amp, and that basically means that it runs off of your basic 15 amp circuit breaker in your house. So you can use this in your living room. You can move around within a normal residence and use any light socket or outlet available to you, which is awesome. For the most part, there's very few housing that uses 10 amps or anything like that. If it's up to code, it's going to be able to run this pretty much, which is the beauty of it. And it utilizes the 15 amp to continue to give you an amazing amount of power for what it's being used on. Now that being said, also, any new construction is probably going to be a 15 amp breaker, so if you were to use this in a job site or construction environment, this would be able to run right off the bat without any issues, hitches, or problems, which is a great feature. Now if you go up into kind of this area, I feel is more of an in-between. It's not full-on commercial grade, and it's not enthusiast or absolute beginner kind of Black & Decker. This, I feel, actually bridges the gap quite nicely. And the bang for buck ratio on this one, I would say, is very high in comparison to a lot of the competition. DeWalt still goes more for a full-on construction feel. It has certain durabilities to it. They use a little more plastic than I would like versus metal, but they're trying to keep it light and have kind of a shock absorbance tolerance for the most part. That being said, I've had a few of those that have actually warped in sun after being in the back of a truck for multitudes of days, consistently just thrown in the back from the hotel room, driven to the job site, and it just lives inside of the back of a truck and is just used consistently throughout the day, but never covered, never anything. Rain, sun, sunshine, snow, it just absolutely brutally beaten. And that's the way they're designed to, but they will eventually start to show things where that much brutal damage will start to cause it to wear down. That is the placement I feel for DeWalt. You can still use it in a residence. It's just a little bit a different design to it. Now, as far as your deltas, your Porter cables, those will have some design features, but they're going to still try to appeal more to a certain price bracket to kind of bridge the gap, but you're going to basically give up features to get features. So it's a trade-off consistently with those models, and it's no one tool is better than the other depending on your purpose, is what I feel. So in that regard, if it doesn't fit your purpose, it's not the tool's fault. It's just more or less where you feel comfortable in your budget and what you're actually going to use it for. This tool, on the other hand, actually ended up checking a lot of the boxes I thought I'd have to drop at least $300 to $500 to get. And this one technically is at $329 on your everyday price. I got this, like I said, on Black Friday for $179.99. Now, you're not going to get that every day. And like I said, it's a Black Friday deal. But even at $329 right now at Lowe's, this is still definitely a bargain. It gives you a lot of those features without you having to stretch that dollar into the $500 range, or plus into some of those areas you go up into $800, $900 in a hurry, depending on what brand you go with. Otherwise, you got to drop it down into the $180 range everyday price to get the more consumer grade items. Like the Ryobi is not bad whatsoever, but it has its faults that you can't really stretch past without personally modifying it in one way or another. You can have a strong motor, but your whole apparatus is a very small cut table, so you have trade-offs. This one actually extends past that quite nicely. Now, looking past some of the other features, this was one of the only models I saw that had the sliding or extending table capability. Now, granted, if I extend this all the way out, I have this huge gap, but if I'm working off of a sheet good, that would be large enough to span that distance, it still makes a very accurate cut, and I can adjust that over to gain some of this table that they leave on the end here, so my cut, as you would have this in the full 30-inch position, this actually sits right here. So you still have a lip to make your cut on. And it matches up almost completely flush. And this is just all out of the box, no modifications. I haven't sanded this, I haven't waxed this, or any of the other care techniques that I should. It just works great right out of the box. And you can beat it up and it still continues to fight the good fight of bringing you what you want for a good, nice cut piece of material. It has the nice locking miter gauge in the front here with a very nice clean and clear display on that. A few of the models I've looked at are very much on the enthusiast to borderline beginner user types. Almost feels like a very big rudimentary, pull this lever, do this, and all that. And this one, it's nice, clear indicated. It still looks like a good chop saw, feels like a chop saw. It doesn't feel like I'm picking up the Duplo or like, kindergarten version or whatnot, if you will, or play school type tool. It's actually something that I felt comfortable enough. I would say this is on par to where I would take this on a job site. And with some minor care and maintenance, I would feel absolutely fine for it to last multiple jobs. But that being said, there is still things on this that can get knocked around and damaged if you're absolutely just, beating it to death. You can always break a tool. There's never a question on that. And it feels like regardless of how much money you spend on it, every tool can break with the proper amount and right angle of abuse put to it in one way or another, whether that's the use of you using the tool or it's abuse through the fact of you literally hucking the tool and seeing if you can make it in the back of your truck from like the second story of a building on a dare. This is all things that can do some serious damage to a tool, and it's never really meant to do that. it can last that. I've seen some DeWalts and some other tools, drills and whatnot, fall out of lifts, fall off of trucks that are going 30 miles down some horrible bumpy road, and the tailgate flies open and you just start seeing, you know, dollar signs go flying out of the back of that truck, and then you just see hopes and dreams crushing behind it. And this, I feel, could actually take a couple tumbles. It's definitely durable in the most part, and like I was saying earlier, there are components on this that are replaceable and readily available on Amazon or eBay. So if you did lose a push stick that perfectly locks into the fence, or if your fence took a huge whack because it fell out of the back of your truck, you can replace that. You can replace your little miter gauge that you set just in that corner kind of off in that one room, and oh dang it, you forgot it. Now you're 75 miles down the road onto the next job site or back to your proper gang box of the next job, and you're like, oh yeah, that's probably not still there. You can get that component again. So it's not something you're going to feel like, oh, well, if I don't get that one particular model in that one particular kit that has its own type of fence and it has its own type of little setup and it's not universal, this will actually facilitate and have a lot of different parts on it that could still utilize a universal piece. It's not 100% only Kobalt. So you could still use this same track for the most part with a lot of different components without having to absolutely build 100% your own. You could still transplant and utilize some other components from another table saw, which is nice. The other model that was in competition with this one for a little bit was the rigid model, and that one was in the same price bracket of $300+. I think that one was like $389 on sale. Normally it runs for around $500 or something like that. And this model was in high competition before I knew about the Black Friday sale. That's ultimately what made my decision, 100% bar none. But looking in between the models, this is one of the only ones that came with a roller stand, which I didn't think was a huge thing at first, but I have to say, having that and having it integrated into the unit is phenomenal. And you can actually remove that stand with not too much work, which is nice. So if you absolutely hated the stand, didn't want it, you can remove it and it will sit pretty well flush for the most part on a tabletop. It's a little goofy, you can tell there's some components that need to go there, but you took them off type deal. But it could still sit flush if you absolutely had to set this on a tabletop or a surface like a truck bed without utilizing the stand. Now the stand doesn't add too much, it does add, I think I measured, collapsed, it does add about 4 inches or so to your overall height. So it does end up being a little taller, which I kind of like a bit. If you did just lay this down on the ground and you were working kind of like quick drop down, make a few cuts, move on to the next site, or if you had a height restriction and you couldn't lift this up for whatever reason, I know there's certain parts of job sites and whatnot you end up getting in some back corner closet making cuts, and you know the foreman is running around the job site and that's the only spot that either has electricity or you're allowed to actually use tools still, and you're in the finishing part of a job and you talked them into letting you make a few cuts on site. Those scenarios, this would actually be able to fit the bill. It's dropping down, you can still make some cuts in that tiny little back room and continue on finishing up your punch work or whatnot. This could work for that. And it would still be solid enough that if I did roll it and let it bounce as I went downstairs, I'm not feeling like on some of the DeWalts where I could lose components to it just because of how loose they're in there. I would lose my push stick, I would lose my little blade guide on there, and other little things like your miter and whatnot. You would lose those components sometimes in certain models of DeWalt without dropping every dollar you got on it. Another fun and useful benefit that this tool definitely has is the nice lever flip action. That's definitely a bit more on the commercial grade side of things. You can flip it and pull this little guy out, and then that'll actually disable it. So if you were to leave this plugged into a wall or anything like that, and you have kids, or if you're in a certain job site area you didn't want people utilizing your tool while you went to the restroom or whatnot, you can still pull that pin. This whole piece of plastic that's green right here comes out, and then you can just walk away with that. And it's just a simple piece of plastic, but it disables the unit from being used without them having to go under here and spend a lot of time doing whatever they need to essentially to connect that circuit to turn it on. Most people aren't going to, especially on a job site. If they're going to do anything kind of shystery or not quite right, they're going to do whatever's quick and easy. to get the job done. They see that this doesn't turn on, they're going to think it's broken or whatever, keep going down the hallway. If you're in a large job site or whatnot, or a school or something that a lot of construction is going on within those magical months of summer, as all of us back in construction days know well, a little too well. To ask the basic questions that everyone that would potentially be viewing this with, is this something that I would purchase again? In a heartbeat. I'd be happy to spend the $329 currently, and you know, before tax, after tax, it'd be closer to like $350 depending on your region and interest rate of, you know, tax or whatnot. This unit is worth every penny of that, and this is definitely your middle ground. It's not your $179, $150 table saw. It's your definite middle grade. It fits and checks all the boxes for residential 100%. It's compact for the most part to where you can fit this in just about anything. Now, if you're in a little Geo Metro, you might be a little hard pressed to get this over that kind of odd back seat those have, but it would still fit to give you kind of a sizing on it. It has the abilities to collapse pretty well. Kind of do a quick little demo of that. So on the bottom here, you have a little unlock lever. Lock that in real quick. You just push that down and lift up on the handles. Tiny shop issues here, but it rolls up. Push that in, locks in place. Nice wheels on it. Moves around quite nicely. On the back side here as well, you do have a space with a wing nut on it for you to be able to lock in your additional 10-inch blades if you're running a couple on site. It has a spot for your Allen key that it comes with, which is nice. And it has all the little components on here that everything else can hook into and latch onto. But one of the things I thought was a very neat idea for it, that not every company has, is it actually comes with a little toolkit. It's just flat steel with cutouts in it, but I can actually change my blade with this. And it gives me an open end and it gives me a box end, as well as a little open end and then a little hook guy. I can't remember, there's a part of this that could utilize to kind of fish out or retrieve any components that falls into that little trough for your blade. But it all nicely and neatly just stays on the side. And then it has this little wing nut here. Kind of get an idea on that guy. That just holds it all on there pretty nice and neat. And because of how they've hooked this up for multiple parts, kind of turn it sideways so you can see here, you've got multiple attach points, and since this is plastic, but it's got ridges and whatnot that'll give it extra structure, it actually acts as a dampener. So as this is running, as this is moving around, bumping up and down stairs or whatnot, the components don't come loose on it. It's kind of a nice side benefit, if you will. And the build quality of the handles, everything that latches in the inside here to allow that to stay in place, and just everything seems to be well built. It's not the absolute pinnacle of most, 100% titanium, this, that, or the other thing. It still has some flex, it still has some bend, but for the money, for the price, you can't think of this to be available for the most part. And the little features like the integrated stand and whatnot, and how this does drop down pretty low, but it is still taller-ish off the ground. Let's get a quick dimension on that. So overall height to your actual tabletop here, kind of going off the side, is 21 inches. Give me a front idea here. So 21 inches to the top, 20 inches to the bottom of the curve for your track system. Your actual tabletop closed, get this guy off here. So your tabletop closed is 26 inches by a little over 19 and a half, just to give you a rough estimate there. And you do have an overhang for the actual slide rails to get out to 30 inches, but it's not a huge issue because you also have the end of your stand right there. For overall length with stand, for your standing height, holding it right there, looking here, you're at about 46 inches for your total height for the top of your handles. And for a total width, including both of your tracks and out to your fence here, or your offcut ramp, is 27 inches. So from back here, just up in front, you got 27 inches. Or if you just went off of that, it'd be 23 from your front track to your back track. And yeah, it all fits quite well into a very small space. Get that fully locked down there. You can see that nice little trough system in there. So just as before, you can push that little release latch. The wheels roll forward in a normal world without it being a tiny shaft. This would just lie flat. Latch is in place quite nicely. So to get a quick standing height for the item in question, so for the top of the table to the floor, it is 34 inches exactly. From the floor, or ground, or whatever surface you're working on, to the top of the table. And then you just add on, for the height of the fence is 2.5 inches, which is nice. And it gives you a good amount of extra meat to work with, depending on if you are running 2x6s or any odd shaped material. You could technically still run through a 4x4 for thick material through there with no issue. Alrighty, so to kind of bring a wrap around to it, or just tie this up with a nice little tiny bow, it is a wonderful tool, highly recommend it, and I feel this would definitely be a good bargain for the money, and something that you could have on a medium budget. This isn't definitely the first thing you can go out and get. If you're just looking into woodworking, it's a little bit more expensive, but not absolutely reaching for the stars on price. For what you get, this is definitely the one to go for in my book. So hopefully you enjoyed that. I know it's a little lengthy. Hopefully you stuck around and enjoyed this. And I do tend to kind of dawdle and talk and go all over the place. So hopefully you enjoyed that and got some little tidbits of information out of it. And hopefully this has been a good, informative little conversation or chat to allow you to get your decision made. And it's been just kind of little snippets here and there for my opinions on it. Hopefully this has helped form your own opinion of the tool in question, and if it's a good purchase and a good fit for you. Hopefully it's got the features you're looking for. I was very happy to have the ability to get something with all the extra little features I thought I was going to have to get in something more expensive. But this has been a good tool for me, and hopefully it'll be a good tool for you. So thank you very much. If you like this video, if you like what I'm about and what this channel is kind of striving for, please be sure and hit that like button and subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell so that way you get notifications every time that I pump this content out. And we're trying for 1,000 here for subscribers, so anything that you can do helps greatly. So thank you very much for that, and have yourself a good evening, and enjoy your day if it's a daytime for you. Thanks again.